Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Greetings, my good friends, and welcome. Welcome back. The Rush Limbaugh program and the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. The telephone number is 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. And the email address, rushbo@eibnet.us. Let me a second here. There we go. Throw the blank page that's printed. So an armed attacker has been shot dead by the cops after mowing down some students with a car and stabbing them with a knife at The Ohio State University. 9 people are injured. An assailant was reported at the Columbus campus this morning. Federal officials told CNN that a knife-wielding attacker went on a stabbing rampage at Watts Hall around 10 a.m. Their witnesses said that somebody pulled a fire alarm at the building and that the man mowed him down with his car as they were evacuating. Just after 11, a little over an hour ago, police confirmed that the suspect was dead. 9 people injured, 1 in critical condition. That is summation of what's known at the time. Have you heard anything on motive in there? You ever who the guy was? We don't know anything more than this. So we'll keep a sharp eye on this. You know, it'd be easy here to speculate what's going on, but we're not going to do that. We'll wait patiently and find out what we are told, and then we will decide whether or not we believe it. I have never in my life, ladies and gentlemen, never in my life ever been in a situation like this where I literally doubt everything I see in the news. You know this fake news business? This fake news business, the Democrats, I warned everybody, and it's going to continue every day for the next 4 years. Everything that you see, this Jill Stein recount, all of this attention to fake news. The Washington Post has made a fool of itself with a massive story on fake news, as though there has never been satire or parody or lies in the media. Thomas Jefferson wrote about it, about how all the lies, so many lies appeared in the daily media way back in the earliest days of the founding of the country. To pretend that it's something new and from Russia. I mean, these are the people, the Soviet Union, back in the days of Soviet-sponsored communism. When any of us in this country tried to point to the Soviet Union and ring alarm bells, it was people like the Washington Post who made fun of us and poo-pooed us and said, come on, are you the kind of person that sees a communist behind every rock? You are insane. You're a lunatic. The communists are not that bad. And they just did everything they could to lampoon and impugn anybody who wanted to point out the dangers and rigors of communism. They're doing the same thing now with people trying to tell the truth about Castro. Now, those people are now pointing fingers of blame at the old Soviet Union, Russia, and claiming that Russia is behind the election of Donald Trump because Russia sponsored fake news all over social media and so forth. They are doing everything they're doing to delegitimize the Trump election right now, and then they will move forward to try to delegitimize the Trump presidency. That's what all of this is about. Now, with the Jill Stein recount, there's much more than that going on, but that's part of it. The delegitimizing of the Trump election, his victory, and his upcoming presidency. Just look at it as a replay of Florida 2000 with different circumstances. This recount that she's mounted here is such a scam, and it's such a fraud on so many levels. But its secret purpose, and there might be 2 or 3 secret purposes, the overall primary reason for it, outside of raising money for Jill. So you know what this also could be? It could also be a trial balloon for Obama to see how easy he could get rich like the Clintons did when they left office. I mean, if there are this many ticked-off Democrats willing to send in thousands of dollars at the first conspiracy note, imagine how Obama might be salivating out there at the opportunity he's got to become Obama Inc. Now, this fake news business, Let me tell you why it's even a factor. Let me tell you why. It's the same thing I said here at the opening of the program. I don't know what to believe in the mainstream media anymore. My instinct is to not believe any of it. And it's their fault. They got this ball rolling. They are the people. I hate to say this because I like this guy, Jim Rutenberg at the New York Times. We highlighted the story he wrote sometime this past summer. A front page article in the New York Times pretty much encouraging journalists to throw objectivity out the window. Throw it aside. Because the circumstances are so dire, the candidacy of Donald Trump and the potential election of Donald Trump, so dire, circumstances so extreme, that they had to throw out all the rules, all the objectivity, all the fairness. They had to become activists. They had to become advocates. They had to become opinion journalists. And they did. The New York Times urged the media to throw, and never were objective, and they never were fair. All that was a pretense and an illusion, but they threw the illusion out the window. So when the drive-by media, led by the New York Times, openly encourages itself and others to cast aside the time-honored traditions and rules and principles of journalism, when they admit they're going to become fake news, then how can you blame anybody else for getting into it? Fake news has been so blown out of proportion anyway. What it largely is satire and parody that liberals don't understand because they don't have a sense of humor, particularly if it's about them. You can't laugh at them, you can't mock them, you can't make fun of them like they can laugh at and mock and make fun of everybody else. But you try it against them and you've got potentially dangerous situations wherever this happens, because they just can't take it. And, of course, they can't come to grips with the fact that they were rejected in this election, so they have to come up with some sort of excuse. And you won't believe what some of the things are coming up with. Try this. There's a guy in the Washington Post who wrote a story that, this election, you guys may have won it, but do you know that 64% of the economic activity in this country voted for Hillary? In other words, in the areas of the country where 64% of economic growth is, the coast, New York, California, Hollywood, they voted Democrat. And 36% voted Trump. So the economic engine of America actually voted Hillary. And they've come up with a couple of other weird, oddball examples, and they're going to come up with more. And that's genuine fake news because they cannot acknowledge, they cannot accept that they've been rejected. What is it? I'll get to it in a minute. I've got all this laid out to get to it in order. I'm just giving here's a tabletop view of what's coming today. But they've got all kinds of stories they're telling themselves to, in effect, lie and tell themselves they actually won this were it not for the Electoral College. In fact, CNN has a poll. You ready for this? Did I put it on top? CNN has a poll showing that 8 in 10 voters want the Democrat agenda enacted. 80% of people who vote, yes, sirree, Bob, 80% of the people who voted in the election want, here we go, CNN Orc poll, nation divided. And is it ever, after a bruising presidential election featuring the two least liked major party candidates in recent history, more than 8 in 10 Americans say the country is more deeply divided on major issues this year than in the past several years. And more than half say they're dissatisfied with the way democracy is working in the U.S. Nearly 80% overall hope to see the GOP-controlled government incorporate some Democrat policies into its agenda. Classic. They can create a poll that produces whatever result they want. But this, you want fake news? Here you've got fake news. 80% of the people in America want the Republicans to incorporate a lot of Democrat policies into its agenda. 8 in 10 say the Republicans should make an effort to include Democrat policies in any legislation they pass, rather than sticking to a GOP-driven agenda. This happens every time the Republicans win. Every time a Republican wins the White House, whenever Republicans win control of Congress, the drive-bys always claim that the message is voters want a balanced and divided government. This is going to lead, mark my words, it isn't going to be long, for the first 6 months of next year, that we're going to start seeing people like Chuck Schumer and the like start bleating about the rights of the minority. It's going to be something you're going to need a real stiff spine to deal with. But the fake news, believe me, folks, if you want to get to the root of this current iteration of it, they're trying to blame the Russians for it. See, the Democrats can't lose on their own. There always has to be some trick. They can't. It's impossible for them to be rejected, even though they've lost over 1,200 seats since 2008, since they ceased to be a national party. They really are not a national party. They have been decimated, but they're lying to themselves and telling them they actually outnumber us and they overwhelm us and they're more powerful than we are, and it's just the Electoral College that made this an oddball result. So Trump is not legitimate. And one of the great comforts they point to is fake news. And I'm just telling you, they are responsible for it. When they, led by the New York Times, announce publicly that they are going to throw in with Hillary Clinton, that they're going to use every bit of power, all the resources they have to trash Trump and elect Hillary, you can say bye-bye journalism. You can say even bye-bye to the pretense of it, even though there hasn't been anything but a pretense of journalism, objective journalism, for years. But they made it official. So when they throw away the time-honored sacred principles of journalism in a public way, well, then there is no legitimate journalism to be found anywhere. Therefore, everything is fake news. They're bringing all of this on themselves. By the way, for those of you concerned, yeah, we'll get to Conway and Romney. That's interesting what's happening. Kellyanne Conway and Romney and Trump. Really fascinating what's going on. I think we're in store for a presidency even more unlike any that people have been imagining. I think it's going to be tough to predict this and to analyze it, certainly in contemporary traditional terms. But many of you still, I'm sure, upset over the possibility that Trump will not pursue an investigation of Hillary Clinton. Now, that could be all off, too, what with Hillary getting behind this Jill Stein effort on this phony, fake recount. However, little story at the New York Post from yesterday. Don't know how many of you saw it. Trump administration will pressure foreign states to probe Clinton Foundation. Do you see this? Foreign governments will be encouraged to investigate the Clinton Foundation's finances, as many are already turning off money spigots to the scandal-scarred group. You know, that could be another thing going on. Jill Stein, you know what else could this be about? It could be, I mean, do you know this Jill Stein babe has raised more money for this recount than she raised for her campaign? She has raised more money in 2 or 3 weeks than she raised in months for her entire presidential campaign. And the fascinating thing about this recount fundraising scam, she started out saying she would need $1.5 million to do the recount in 3 states. And as donations kept coming in, the amount of money she said she needed kept increasing. Now she's up to needing $4.5 or $5 million. The more money she gets, the more money she says she needs. It's clearly a scam. What if some of the donors are indeed Clinton Foundation donors who have been hoodwinked into thinking this is a genuine effort to get Hillary elected president so that the money they sent to her foundation could actually be worth something? What if they think it's just costing them? There could be any number of possibilities to explain why so much money is flowing into this recount effort. And it may not be any need to really complicate it with a bunch of different theories. It's probably staring us right in the face. The left can't accept rejection. They can't accept defeat. And they're going to spend the next 4 years telling themselves they didn't lose, that Trump is illegitimate. And they're going to have the media just dumping all over the Republicans each and every day. And who knows what role Obama's going to play in that, but he will be playing one. Yeah, the Castro stuff, too. This is fascinating, too. The way the left is reacting to the death of Fidel Castro up against the incontrovertible facts of who he was. You want to talk about a disconnect? In fact, I don't think it is a disconnect. I think the left, the power brokers, the leaders, I think they actually did admire the guy. I think this is what they think, Castro's power. I've always said, people have asked me, how come all these actors and people in these leftist politicians, how come they admire people like this? And I said, they envy their power. And I think that there may be a lot to that. Let me take a brief time out. We've briefly set the table. We'll come back and continue here as we're back to normal on the EIB network. Don't go away. Here are the two greatest examples of the Democrats lying to themselves about how they actually won. And there will be many more of these as time unfolds. But here's Ezra Klein, who is at Vox. Vox is this millennial publication where they claim to explain the news. They don't report the news, they explain what it means, because audiences are too stupid to understand it. Ezra Klein, more Americans voted for Hillary Clinton than Trump. More Americans voted for Democrat Senate candidates than for Republican Senate candidates. So why aren't Democrats acting like it? Why aren't the Democrats trying to force Republicans in the media and Trump to act like it? Why? We won. We won. That more people voted for Hillary. We won. Why aren't our people acting like Ezra? You didn't win. We elect presidents via the Electoral College. The popular vote's not a factor. And if it were, this campaign would have been entirely different. And rather than 16 states being campaigned in, 3 or 4 would have been. That's why the Electoral College is set up. But this is really unhinged. More Americans voted for Democrat Senate candidates than for Republican Senate candidates. The New York Yankees scored 3 times the runs the Pittsburgh Pirates did in the 1960 World Series, but the Pirates won the World Series. Ezra, the Democrats have lost 1,200 seats. The Democrats have lost something like 69 House seats, 11 Senate seats, 39 governorships. It's incredible what the Democrats have lost. You're not winning anything, Ezra. You're losing to the point that all you are is a coastal party. Now, here's the next one. It's from this guy is Jim Tankersley, Washington Post. He talks about how divided we are as a country, but that the real division is economic. According to a Brookings Institute analysis, the less than 500 counties that Clinton won nationwide combined to generate 64% of America's economic activity last year. The more than 2,600 counties that Trump won combined to generate 36% of the country's economic activity. So less than 500 counties, 64% economic activity voted Hillary. Mr. Tankersley, you think it would make sense if you looked at this the right way? 36% of the country's economic activity is located in something like 2,600 counties. That's not good. Those people there were ticked off, Mr. Tankersley. Those people want an improved economy. That's the Obama economy you're talking about. It makes sense they would vote against it. Welcome back. My friends, Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone. You notice that when the attacker at the Ohio State University attacked, the people did not call Black Lives Matter. They called the cops. Imagine that. They called the police. They didn't call Black Lives Matter, and they didn't call Barack Hussein O. And I also happen to note that the bad guy at the Ohio State University was killed by somebody with a gun. Yes, somebody with a gun got the bad guy, and potential victims, the terrorized at Ohio State, did not call Black Lives Matter. Real life lessons as observed here on the EIB network. By the way, I know the Jill Stein recount, everybody involved, Hillary's campaign, Jill Stein, everybody involved says they haven't found one shred of evidence of any chicanery. They haven't found any evidence of tampering with votes. They haven't found any evidence that anything is illegitimate or criminal. And now I was wrong. Jill Stein's up to needing $7 million. Her original claim was that she needed $1.5 million. Now she needs $7 million. I mean, it's a fun. There's so many things wrapped up in one here. It's a fundraising scam. It's a trial balloon, I think, for perhaps Obama to see just how fluid and angry Democrat losers are and how freely they will part with their money, depending on what they're being asked to pay for. And that's another thing, folks, about all of this. All of these stories designed to tell Democrat voters that they actually won, that it was just the quirks of our democracy and maybe some chicanery and the Russians and fake news, which led to Trump's victory, that it's totally illegitimate. And then you go out, send us some money so we can continue our efforts to establish and prove this. Democrats are writing checks left and right. Democrats are being scammed by the people responsible for their loss. It's an amazing thing to see. But I want to go back to this because you're going to see all kinds of these examples as the effort to make the Trump win illegitimate and his presidency illegitimate. Numbers, I know, are hard to follow on the radio. But I want to go through this because this is the Washington Post. The Washington Post is quickly trying to become the safe space for Donald Trump deniers, for the Trump won the election deniers. I think the Washington Post is establishing itself as the safe space for anti-Trump delicate snowflakes to go. And this guy, Jim Tankersley, says that the divide in America is real and it's big, but that it is economic. And he cites a Brookings Institute analysis. Hillary Clinton won, and they claim the popular vote. She won in less than 500 counties. And those counties who number less than 500 generate 64% of economic activity in America. Trump won 2,600 counties. And all of those counties, I mean, Hillary, less than 1/5 of the counties that Trump won. And yet those counties generate 64% of the USA economy. And the 2,600 counties that Trump won only generate 36% of the country's economic activity. So doesn't it sort of make sense that people who can't get a job and can't find any economic activity and can't get a raise and haven't, doesn't it make sense that they would vote for Trump? They're not participating in the Obama economy. They're not participating in the Democrat economy. It makes total sense. And yet they want to turn this number into, and what they're trying to say here is that, well, the brains and the engine of American prosperity, the smart people, they voted for Hillary. The rubes, the idiots, the out of work, the lazy, the people who are not making America work, the people not contributing, they voted for Trump. They're idiots. That's what is being said here. And, of course, liberal Democrats who read this are just sopping it up. And they're actually believing that this election, and this is where they're catching themselves short. I've read them. I've studied what they're saying. They actually think that the Trump election is a weird outlier, that America will instead, and without much effort will continue to trend in the direction Obama was taking it. That most people wanted that. And CNN's got a poll for them. 8 in 10 want Trump to incorporate the Democrat agenda into his. And so they're telling themselves that there was some weird aberration here and that this is the last dying gasp of Republicans and conservatives. Trump's election is a last dying gasp. That we get through these 4 years or however many years it takes to impeach Trump, and then we'll get back to what was normal. Well, they're going to lose out on shaping the Supreme Court for at least a generation. They're going to have to put up with so much of what Obama implemented being just ripped to shreds and ripped out. This is much more than an aberration. The Democrat Party has been reduced to the point it's not a national party anymore. And these guys, citing their statistics, whether they know it or not, are proving it. They have no representation. They have no appeal. They have nothing about them to recommend them to well over 90% of the geographic area of the country. And it's huge, and these people try, well, it doesn't matter because there's not nearly as many people live there. Well, you lost it. No, we didn't lose the illegal popular vote. We won. They're telling themselves they won everything. Mere aberration. And you know the old saw. When you have a problem, the first thing to do in addressing it is to honestly identify it. These people can't even bring themselves to that area. So I think they're headed for even tougher times than they even imagine. They're also going nuts over Trump tweeting the idea that millions of illegal aliens voted, and if you take those votes out, he's probably going to win the popular vote. I wish I could remember. I saw that somewhere. I saw it was an opinion piece someplace, and I can't remember where. But I even referenced on this program when I saw it that people looking into it, and that we will know at some point. I mean, do you like the Democrats instead? They're acting like, oh, my God, that they're accusing of fraud? There's no evidence of any fraud. These are the people before the election were running around claiming there already was fraud. These are the people before the election were warning of it, and they were telling everybody be on the lookout for it. They had their lawyers at all the polling places. They were expecting fraud. They use fraud. They have perfected it. They oppose voter ID so that they can engage in it. And now all of a sudden when Trump references the possibility, these people, no, this election was clean and pure as the wind-driven snow. Except now they want to look at maybe recounting in 3 states where they can't find any evidence of chicanery. They can't find any evidence of tampering. And yet they must think there was some, or they wouldn't want these recounts. And yet when Trump alludes to possible fraud, they laugh at it and mock it and say it's ridiculous, while at the same time they're trying to find it. Of course, not their own. They're trying to find, they don't want to find the evidence of illegal aliens voting. No, they want to find discrepancies between machine tabulations and paper ballots. And they want to look at these variations, if there are any, and claim the machines were tampered with by the Russians, by Vladimir Putin, the Russians. Now, keep in mind, this is the same party that got in bed with the Soviet Union everywhere it could around the world, including Cuba, including Nicaragua, including Ted Kennedy warning and begging Soviet leaders to be patient until they could get rid of Reagan. The same people who have done the bidding of the Soviet Union in the U.S. House of Representatives. Yes, I know exactly what I'm saying. The Democrat Party has had a friendly, supportive relationship with every communist regime on this planet in my lifetime. And now, all of a sudden, their buddies, the Soviets, i.e. Putin and the Russians, have abandoned them and are now sabotaging them for the purposes of elected. These people are deranged. They're literally losing their... I think they're out of their minds. They've literally lost their minds. They don't know what they're talking about. They're flapping just to hear their heads rattle. They have no semblance of substance in anything that they are talking about now, and they're bringing along their deranged lunatic fringe, which is their base, right along with them. And it's contributing to this whole idea of a divided country with no hope for crossing the gap or bridging the gap. So you sit tight, my friends. I'm wound up about all this, and I'm going to try to squeeze as many of your phone calls in. And we've got still to discuss Castro. Look, this is a teachable moment, a big-time teachable moment. The death of Fidel Castro and the way that death was treated by many, if not most, in the American media and the Democrat Party, with a couple of noted exceptions. One of the exceptions being Pelosi. But the most accurate take, the most accurate reaction, the most dead-on public statement about the death of Fidel Castro came from Trump. Obama's was neutral. You know, Obama was telling Castro, that's the kind of thing Obama, they all these leftists, these social justice warriors, they admire what they think Castro was trying to do. He had free health care for everyone. Never mind that nobody could access it. It's absurd. I can't wait to share with you a story in the Washington Post about this. It's sick. It is dangerous how wrong, how factually incorrect, how attitudinally, how ideologically wrong this is. It's dangerous. It'd be one thing if it was from a kook, obscure conspiracy website, but this is in the Washington Post. You know, Brian Williams. Do you hear what Brian Williams said? He said people in Cuba prefer donkey-drawn carts to automobiles. The people of Cuba prefer to be driven around by donkeys in carts rather than the 1950s and 60s automobiles, which are the newest that you can find in Cuba. They prefer it. Quick timeout, folks. Hang in there. Be tough. We'll be back. A man, a legend, a way of life. Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone, executing assigned host duties flawlessly. You know, Mondays after a long break are tough. Because I've been collecting data. I worked all 4 days, and I've got this gigantic stack, and I'm trying to get to all of it in the first hour. So if I sound a little hectic, that's why. I have to tell myself, don't push it. Got 3 hours here. But and I'm going to need all of them. I'm going to get started on the phones now with Mike in Atlanta. You're first today, sir, and it's great to have you. How are you?
Hey, Rush. How are you doing?
Well done, sir. Very much.
Awesome. I started listening to your show when this whole election process started, and thank you very much. Very informative, and I appreciate it a lot.
You're more than welcome. I appreciate you saying that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get your take on something after Trump's picks for the Mitt Romney or Giuliani for the Secretary of State. I think it'll be a great pick for him to go with, to bring Romney in there to show the rest of the Republican Party that, you know, let's sweep everything under the rug. Let's join this thing together.
Well, you know, I understand that thinking. I totally reject it, however. The pick is too important to give it to somebody because they want it. It's too important to give it to somebody to show unity. It's too important a position to try to do anything other than fill it. I mean, it's a serious position. The Secretary of State is the president's representative to every foreign government with whom we have relations, and even our enemies around the world. Right. The president can't talk to them all, protocol and a number of other reasons. Secretary of State has to carry out the policies of the President of the United States. That, to me, is the only criteria. Now, even we're here, we don't know what to believe. This is another thing you have to be really careful, Mike, all of you. Like, for example, one of the things that you're reading is that Trump really likes Romney because he's got really great looks. Romney looks good on TV. Romney presents well. That's what we're being told that Trump says privately about Romney. I, for one, don't believe that. He may be saying it, but that's not why he would pick him to be Secretary of State. If you examine the way all of this has gone down, and if you know Donald Trump like I do, people have forgotten Romney went out in the very early stages of this campaign and savaged Trump in a way that was so sincere and deeply felt that it, to me, seems impossible that Romney could even apologize and mean it for what he had said. There was no doubt that he doesn't think Donald Trump or didn't think Donald Trump should be within 1,000 feet of the White House. But now the talk about, well, he might issue an apology or the Trump camp is demanding an apology. I have a thought about what this all is, but sadly, I just now glanced at the clock, and I'll have to wait to share my thought with you on this. But I don't think, to answer your question, that the pick ought to have anything to do with showing the Republicans or anybody else anything. Kellyanne Conway, Trump campaign manager, savaging Mitt Romney, just savaging him. The question everybody's asking, has she gone rogue, or is she doing this at the direction of Donald Trump? We will explore that and everything else when we get right back here. And greetings to you once again, music lovers, thrill seekers, conversationalists all across the roiled, fruited plain. Rush Limbaugh here, making more sense than anybody else out there. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. If you want to send an email, I checked them. A new email address is lrushmo@eibnet.us. Now, look, let me finish up on the Romney business because I didn't get a chance to finish up with the caller. A previous caller had asked me, or had opined, had said that he really thinks Romney would be a great choice because it would send a message to the Republican establishment that Trump is willing to include them. And that is the way everything's always been done in Washington, and that's what we're hoping does not happen here. The way it's always been done is what was sent packing. You know, pick somebody here because it'll make somebody there happy. Pick somebody here because it'll make the media report X. Pick somebody here because it'll build bridges elsewhere. Now, the ambassador to Cuckoo-stan, fine. Secretary of State, no. I mean, that's what ambassadorships and under-ambassadorships and under-secretary positions are for, is to take care of the patronage and to show people that you really don't hate them as much as they think you do or whatever. Secretary of State, look how important it is. Look what we got, 4 years of Hillary Clinton, an utter disaster. We have a Middle East on fire because we put somebody in that job, Obama did, totally unprepared, ill-equipped, and incompetent. Hillary Clinton had literally zero experience in things necessary for that job. But Obama put her there for reasons totally unrelated to that. He was going to run foreign policy. She was going to be the rubber stamp, but the face of it in case it blew up, so that he would not be insulated. She was his Limbaugh theorem protection on foreign policy. Middle East blows up, it's Hillary's plan. If Libya didn't go well, that's because Hillary decided to overthrow Gaddafi. If we had not gotten bin Laden, that would have been Hillary's fault. It would have been whispered to the media. That would have been the report, and it would have been Obama at least would have tried it. He ran that show. But Hillary, he wanted to keep her in-house. You know the old saw, you'd rather have your enemies inside the tent peeing out than outside the tent peeing in. despite what Obama said about Hillary during the campaign and convention, there's no love lost between those two or the families, the Obamas and the Clintons. It's all fake. I mean, that was all strategy. It was all buzz and PR positioning. She was no more qualified to be the chief diplomat of this. She had no foreign policy experience. I mean, look at what the first thing she did was a silly reset our relations with Russia with a plastic red reset. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was literally Henry Kissinger. I mean, he was aghast when he saw this. And so was anybody else with any sincerity. I mean, Obama made every effort to get in bed with the Russians. That's what makes their claim now the Russians tampered with our election even funnier. Because it was the Obama administration was trying to get in bed with them. Don't forget, in 2011, during the campaign, there was an open mic. Obama was talking to the foreign minister, some diplomat from the Soviet Union, number 2 guy to Putin, Dmitry Medvedev. And the open mic caught Obama saying, "Tell Vlad," as in Putin, "tell Vlad that'll have a lot more flexibility after the election." They were talking about America reducing its nuclear arsenal, not the Russians, just America. Because you see, in Obama's world, the American nuclear arsenal is the threat. If America would get rid of our nuclear arsenal, then the rest of the world would realize we don't threaten them, that we're not the bad guys, and that they can all breathe easier. That's dangerously incompetent and borderline insane. But that was our position. Hillary had no more business discussing events in the Middle East. I don't care whether it was the Israelis and Palestinians or whether it was whatever was going on with the Muslim Brotherhood. She was totally, totally out of her league. The woman hasn't been in her league since she stopped being First Lady. This is a woman who has survived on reputation alone, resume-enhanced reputation that was built and promoted by the Democrats and the media. The woman hasn't got any practical experience, certainly no success stories. Maybe her most successful operation, the Limbaugh eruptions unit in the White House, but even that had its problems. So she's a great example. I mean, long story short, she's a great example of putting somebody in the job for all the wrong reasons. Mitt Romney, what recommends him to be Secretary of State? When I don't know what your reaction was, but of all the things I've thought of for Romney, Secretary of State, that wasn't one. But Rush, he saved the Olympics. Well, yeah, but he was an autocrat there. Look, I remember what Romney said about Trump. And it was stuff you can't take back. It was personal. Called him a con man, a cheat, dishonest, a liar. I mean, every insult that you can think of, except he wasn't insulting him. He was trying to alert everybody to the reprobate Donald Trump is. Now, what's going on with Kellyanne Conway? Well, there are two schools of thought on this. As you know, Kellyanne Conway, starting over the Thanksgiving weekend, started going public with how many people she was hearing from who opposed Romney. And it was an overwhelming number, she said. And the number kept increasing. She kept hearing from people, no to Romney, no way to Romney. People don't want Romney. And the question immediately arose, well, now, wait just a minute. This is unusual. Somebody in the inner circle going public with what's going on behind the scenes about a nominee. So people began to ask, here's the original theory was that Trump never forgets, that Trump knows what Romney said, and that Trump wants to dangle a carrot in front of Romney and make him think he might have a chance at it, and then yank it away at the last moment and smile. Oops, sorry, Mitt, did you ever really think I was considering this? That was the original theory, and that Kellyanne was part of it, that she had been sent out to take the place of Trump, describing how much opposition Romney was getting. As Romney's name had been floated, and seriously, Romney's name, Rudy's name. The impression was that Trump was seriously considering both. And the New York Post had a story over the weekend that Trump, while down here at his club, Mar-a-Lago, on Thanksgiving Day, was going table to table, asking club members, who do you think I should pick, Romney or Giuliani? That Trump was asking everybody he ran into. That was the story in the New York Times. Then Kellyanne Conway ups her tweeting and makes it even more abundantly clear that not only does she not want Romney, but nobody she knows wants Romney. Then the next thing to hit was that Trump was supposedly furious about this, that she's gone rogue, that Trump is not behind this, that he doesn't want this handled this way, and in fact does have another meeting scheduled with Romney tomorrow. He also has a meeting this week with David Petraeus, who's also in line for the same gig, Secretary of State. So now the thinking, you can take it one of two ways. You can think it's Kellyanne Conway, an insider campaign manager, who is dismayed and distraught and concerned and worried that Trump is actually considering Romney and thinks it would be one of the biggest mistakes he could make and has told him so face to face, but it doesn't appear he's listening. So she's doing whatever she can to force Trump not to pick the guy because she thinks it would be one of the biggest mistakes he could make in terms of disappointing his voter base. I know some people who voted for Trump. This is anecdotal. This doesn't mean anything. I'm just passing it on. I know some people that are ticked anyway that Romney's even being considered. They don't understand it. Why would Trump even play games with this after what Romney said? People weren't supportive of Romney in 2008 as president. They didn't like him then for a host of reasons. Why in the world of all the people would Trump? I know a lot of people very concerned that Trump really wants him and would consider it an act of betrayal. So maybe Kellyanne, look, all we can do is speculate here because I don't know. No, I wouldn't ask. See, I'm not going to start calling these people and ask them because they're not going to tell me what's really going on. So I can just join the crowd to speculate here. And it looks to me like Kellyanne has taken it on herself to try to keep Trump from doing this. The other possibility is that she's not gone rogue, that Trump's behind all of this, and that this is how he is choosing to pay Romney back for what he did by having this never-ending stream of we hate Romney, we hate Romney, we hate Romney for day after day after day. So of those two, folks, what do you think it is? Kellyanne's gone rogue, that she's worried that Trump's actually going to choose the guy and thinks it'd be a big mistake and is risking her professional reputation by taking an inside baseball matter public? Or is she doing Trump's bidding? Is it all part of a brilliantly conceived, flawlessly executed stratagem designed to squash Romney into the dirt by dangling the carrot, making it look like it's possible, and then the reaction to it being universal disgust and disagreement as a means of paying Romney back without Trump ever having to say it? What do you think it is, Mr.? You go for option two, that this is Trump directing Kellyanne to do this. Well, I know, look, Snerdley just said to me, Kellyanne's too smart to go rogue like this. This is, and David Axelrod's out there. This is extraordinary. You just don't see this. But this is not your traditional president or presidency or transition. There's nothing traditional about it. So to say, well, it's extraordinary, maybe over there for establishment types, but we don't know what's extraordinary yet and what is normal. What we do know is that basically throw out everything you think you know about insider politics with the Trump transition and Trump in the presidency and his presidential elect position here, because he's exactly opposite of that, and that's why he got elected. And so maybe it isn't extraordinary. Maybe this is one of these. I mean, look at Trump tweeting is extraordinary. Whatever he tweets, just the fact that he continues to tweet is extraordinary. People can't get their arms around that. I mean, establishment types can't get their arms around that. Let me grab a quick phone call here. We have a woman, a new listener. I'm fascinated talking to new listeners. And she says she's been listening since July. Her name is Martha. She's in Springfield, Massachusetts. Hey, Martha, great to have you on the program. Hi.
Hi, Rush.
So how can I be of service? By the way, thank you for joining the program. I'm very happy to have you in the audience. I'm glad you tuned in July and hung around.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the education that I've gotten from listening to you. And, I was able to vote for Trump and educate my son a little bit to vote for Trump. I also wanted to make a comment about the Democrats investigating voter fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's a possibility one of the reasons they're doing that is to kind of clean up their own voter fraud as they go, or try to erase it?
This is interesting. I'm fascinated with the way people think, and you are classic as you've learned a lot. What she's saying, folks, she's asking me, is it possible the real reason the Democrats are doing this is because they committed the fraud and they want to find it and scrub it before anybody else does? Is that your question?
Yes.
I think I really love the thought process. That you have an ability to critically think and your mind is expansive. That's fascinating. I don't think that's what's going on here. But because I don't think they'd be worried if they were caught cheating. They do it every year, and they've got the media on their side. Believe me, the media on their side gives them insurance policies like you can't fathom. You really can't. So I don't think they're worried about that. I think what they're really trying to do, I can't find a soul who really thinks that this is about unseating Trump. I think it is. I think their giant goal, I think their dream package here is to be able to subvert the Electoral College count. I think they would love, I think there are some of them in this effort that would love for things to eventuate that Hillary Clinton ends up being president. Now, see, there's I didn't tell you, I'm not telling you I think they succeed. You're asking my motivation. I think they are, if you disagree with this, then you still have a lot to learn on how deranged they are. There are some of them who really think they can make Hillary president in this process, and they're trying. Now, if they don't get there, they still have Dream B and Dream C, Scenario B, Scenario C. All of it is aimed at delegitimizing the election of Donald Trump and the presidency of Donald Trump. Now, if they can't get him unseated and get Hillary selected as president, which is, well, if they can't accomplish that, they'll take Dream Scenario B or Dream Scenario C. But, Martha, they're even saying they haven't found any evidence of tampering or fraud at all. And that's not why they're doing this, by the way. They're making it very clear. They're not doing this because of that. They're doing it because a computer scientist suspects the Russians hacked. There isn't any evidence, but the seriousness of the charge is such they have to investigate it. Back after this. Here's Jeff Zeleny on CNN just moments ago talking about what's going on in Wisconsin with the recount. Jeff Zeleny, formerly New York Times, now with CNN. Question, Jeff, tell us what's going on with the recount. How is this playing out?
Election officials in Wisconsin had a meeting that wrapped up just a short time ago in Madison, Wisconsin, and they have decided that this recount will go forward and start on Thursday if Green Party candidate Jill Stein pays for this recount. It was at her request, of course, here. But the election board said that the 72 counties across Wisconsin will not be required to hand count these ballots. They can simply retabulate them. They can if they choose individually, but they will not be required to. So that could open up the Election Commission to a potential lawsuit from the Stein campaign. We're keeping an eye on that. And the Stein campaign still has their eye on potentially Pennsylvania and Michigan as well.
All right, let me translate this for you. In Wisconsin, they have concluded a meeting, and they've decided that the Jill Stein requested recount will go forward if she ponies up, if she pays for it. The election board has the 72 counties in Wisconsin will not be required to hand count the ballots. They can simply retabulate them. That's the difference in counting and retabulating is you take county totals, precinct totals, and re-add them. But you do not recount. You don't go open ballots and start counting them and measuring them up against the previous count. You just take the existing totals and add them again. And that would be the retabulation. They can do that. If they want to hand count them, they can. Now, if not every county behaves the same, he was saying that could open up a potential lawsuit. Anything to delay the Electoral College count. Welcome back. Great to have you, El Rushbo. Talent on loan from God. Okay, so now the Democrats, Jill Stein, actively pursuing voter fraud. Now, remember, prior to the election, when Republicans would talk about it, the Democrats would laugh at them and make fun of them and accuse them of this or that or the other thing and tell them it was unseemly and very un-American. Now, who is pursuing voter fraud? Let me tell you what I think is really going on here, and it could be any number of things or a combination of things. I think at the very least, the Democrats are going to put voter fraud on their list of particulars for impeaching Trump. I don't have any doubt that there's going to be a Democrat effort to impeach Trump. And what they're already beginning now to establish the evidentiary chain. And one of the elements of this is going to be that he's illegitimate, that he really didn't win. And they've got this popular vote margin they keep focusing on of 2.1 or 2.2 million votes now. And they're going to say that's just too big to ignore. That means the Electoral College may have outlived its usefulness. They're going to really focus on that. And the media, of course, is going to amplify it. And the overall theme is Trump's election was not legitimate. They're not going to say it was unfair. They're going to say it was not legitimate. Therefore, Trump is illegitimate. Therefore, his presidency is illegitimate. Therefore, his agenda is illegitimate because the people really didn't select this. CNN's already got their poll out there. 8 out of 10 Americans, it says, want Trump to incorporate the Democrat agenda into his. This is all, folks, coordinated. This is all coming. It's either from the Hillary campaign or from the Obama White House or some combination of Democrat strategists and community organizers, malcontents, and what have you. It won't be long, I predict, that voter fraud will be accepted as a fact by the media, that there was voter fraud. Right now, everybody's saying they don't have any evidence. Jill Stein says no evidence, but they've got these two computer wackos who claim that the disparities between voting machines and paper ballots, why, it's it's too great to ignore. And the voting machines would be the inroad for the Russians to affect the election and hack various polling places. I can see this developing even now before it has. I grow weary of saying it, but I know these people. I know how they operate. I know who they are. I know how they strategize. And I know the way they think. And nothing with them is happenstance. Everything's polled. Everything's focus grouped. It's tested. And if at the least, if everything in it goes wrong, they're still going to end up raising tons of money from unhappy, deranged, lunatic leftists who have been made that way by the Democrat Party and the media. And they're going to promise them that with every donation, they get closer to unseating Trump or to nullifying Trump or negating Trump or what have you. And they're going to focus on that 2 million plus advantage in the popular vote. Trump's out there saying that by the time you tabulate the illegals, that it won't be anywhere near that he probably will win the popular vote. And you know what? Look at the reaction to that. This is irresponsible. This is unreal. Donald Trump has no evidence. He's just flying off the handle once again. It's an example of how stupid Donald Trump is, how dangerous Donald Trump's alleging voter fraud. There is no evidence. And yet, who's pursuing it? The very people calling Trump deranged and a lunatic and dangerous and silly and stupid for alleging voter fraud are actually the ones pursuing it. Our old buddies, the American left and the Democrat Party. Now, Michigan. There are 3 states here, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Michigan is supposedly going to hand count the ballots. I say supposedly because all of this is still up in the air. Wisconsin is one of the few states where you do not have to have any evidence of fraud for a recount. All you have to do in Wisconsin is pay for it. You can recount a landslide loss. You can recount a landslide win if you pay for it. You don't need any evidence. But you do need evidence in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania requires evidence, and that evidence be presented, which Jill Stein does not have. I don't know if she has any evidence in Michigan, but she's out saying they don't have any evidence anywhere of fraud. That's why they've got to look for it. It's the same old Democrat trick. No, there isn't any evidence. That's why we got to look at it. The charge is so serious, we've got to find out. So Stein would have to file for a court appeal and prove in court that fraud was probable, which is going to be difficult given that computer specialists recommending the recount say there is no proof of hacking or fraud. And this report, these 2 computer wackos, these 2 guys, I forget their names, but they reported it was in the media. I forget, it might have been Washington Post. It was over the weekend, maybe even last Wednesday before we all left. They reported the possibility, and they focused on the disparity between the voting machine tabulations and the paper ballot tabulations. Wait a minute, something's not adding up here. We don't have any evidence, but it looks like the Russians could have gone in there and hacked the machines. Honest to God, that's what they're saying. And it's on that basis that Jill Stein started raising money. Michigan only has paper ballots. So why do a recount there? Well, once recounts start, and depending on, remember how Florida goes, you can find votes that weren't there. Al Franken got elected that way. They found whatever hundreds, thousands of votes Franken needed to put him over the top over Norm Coleman. Now, they're out there saying Trump's got no evidence whatsoever that any illegals voted. They're laughing at him. They're mocking him. They're making fun of him. And yet Jill Stein's got no evidence either, and they're applauding her, and they're helping her raise money for it. The conventional wisdom is that none of this is going to lead anywhere, that Trump won, it's over, there's nothing the Democrats can do. And I'm telling you that's the wrong way to look at this. The wrong way to look at this is that just a bunch of kooks getting their last gasp frustrations over with and done with. There is always much more to it than this. There is a potential impeachment. Don't doubt that they're thinking already about it, folks. It really would help to understand the mindset of the people who've lost the election, not just the elected officials, but the voters. They have an air of superiority about them. They are convinced that they are the far and away majority. They really do believe that this election was stolen. They really do believe that they represent a majority of the way people think in this country. This election is a total outlier and aberration. They haven't lost anything. They are not losing anything. They are continuing to gain ground. Trump is an idiot. You're an ignoramus for voting for Trump. You're a bellicose ignoramus and a fool, or you're just an idiot. But they are marching on, and you are going to be erased from human history in due course. Those of you who voted for Trump and Trump himself. And so all it takes for deranged, deluded people like that to continue is for somebody like Jill Stein to come along and start raising big money to try to make sure Trump doesn't get sworn in. And these lunatics that they have fear-mongered and scaremongered into being who they are will send them money left and right, which is happening. If they could delay the Electoral College vote, which is scheduled for December 19th, what if these three recounts are designed? I mean, let me ask you this. So Wisconsin's going to start. It is November 28th. Do you think Wisconsin can be finished with their recount if they decide to hand count by December 19th? If they're not finished, if Wisconsin is not finished by December 19th, and the winner of the state is not certified, the elector for Wisconsin cannot vote. The electors. What if they succeed in the same thing in Michigan? What if they succeed in denying Trump whatever number of electoral votes because the electors in those states can't vote because the elections there are not yet certified? What if Trump doesn't get to 270 on December 19th simply because a number of states haven't reported because they're still in recount? Well, then the election goes to the House, in which case Donald Trump's going to be elected and Mike Pence is going to be elected in the Senate as vice president, and you're going to end up with the same result, but it's all going. The Democrats could then say, he didn't win anything. He didn't even get 270. This is outrageous. The Republicans nominated and elected their own president and violated the Democrat. I can just hear it now. I can just hear it all now. How none of this is legitimate. The country has been stolen by Trump and these Republicans, and there was nothing fair and there was nothing legitimate. And if you think Florida 2000 was bad, and do not doubt me, they would be happy to live this way. They would consider the Democrats, this would be one of the greatest success stories that they could ever tell themselves. And make no mistake, they are entirely capable of this. And don't make another mistake. Hillary Clinton would be right in there supporting this. Every Democrat under the sun, from Barack Obama on down. And if Fidel Castro were still alive, he would sign on to it. And they would gladly have him. We got to get to the Castro stack here in due course, too. So sit tight, folks. Stuff to chew on there. Back in just a second. Yeah, let me point it all out. It's true. This Jill Stein babe, it's called me a fundraising scam, too. But I think there's more to it than just a fundraising scam. I think there is. Everything I just said before the break, I believe. I believe the primary effort here is the effort to delegitimize Trump's victory and his upcoming presidency. She's also running an email scam, a fundraising scam here. She's even confirming, by the way, that she cannot guarantee all the money is going to be spent on a recount. And even if a recount is forced, the extra cash would stay with her. It's not going to cost nearly the amount of money she's raised. And she's announced that, and that she's going to keep the money. So there's obviously a whole lot happening here. And all of it could have aspects of truth to it. Here is Joe in Tampa. Glad you waited, sir. Welcome to the EIB Network. Hello.
Oh, mega dittos. Yeah, Mr. Limbaugh, I was wondering if maybe you thought that Kellyanne Conway, as you had earlier mentioned, was doing this, coming out against Mitt Romney as something that possibly Trump wanted her to do. Because I don't think her being as close to the campaign as she has been running everything would come out and stab him in the back like that.
Well, understand your thinking. And I don't know what's going on. I'm like you. I can propose scenario A, scenario B, and then take a wild guess at it. From everything I've been able to learn, Kellyanne Conway is not going to be part of the administration. She has turned down press secretary, other positions, so she's may even now may not be an official member of the Trump team anymore. Not sure about that, but I've heard from people in the know that she has refused various offers to stay in the administration. So, does it change your thinking at all if you were to learn she's not on Team Trump per se as we speak?
No, I still think that she would be behind him 100%. I don't think she would have turned around and
okay, remember, she started this campaign running the pack for Ted Cruz. She started the campaign as a cruiser and then migrated over to the Trump campaign at some point. You realize, maybe you don't, you should understand that there are a lot of people, maybe not inside the Trump team right now, but there are a lot of people who still are keeping Trump at arm's length that are not sure what he's going to do as president. They're not sure how much of what he said he meant. They're not confident. They're waiting to see if his actions match his words. What if Kellyanne is one of those people who is yet to be convinced that Trump is what he said he is, and maybe she's really, really alarmed that there's no way Donald Trump under any sun should even be considering Mitt Romney, given everything that happened in the campaign and everything Trump said about foreign policy. And yet here he is considering, and maybe Kellyanne is literally appalled and is very, very worried that this represents Trump not being who everybody thinks he is and is doing what she can to keep him honest. Ponder that. Hey, I'm just throwing things out, folks. It is the fastest 3 hours in media. I mean, already 2 of them are gone, so I've got to move fast here, folks. I got to move into the Fidel Castro stack. Again, a teachable moment for so many people as we have continued increased tune-in factor here almost at record levels. It's actually fabulous, so we'll take advantage of that with the Castro stack, and we'll continue with all this other stuff, too, when we get back, so don't go away. Is that right? That makes perfect sense. I'm going to have to check into this. I was just told that if, for example, Wisconsin doesn't finish, then you throw their electoral votes out totally, and the number does not become 270. It becomes whatever. So 270 is only a majority of the available votes. So if Wisconsin electoral votes are not ready and not counted, then the number Trump needs is not 270, it's a lesser number. I have to check into this. That would nuke the theory that one of the Democrats' efforts here is to get 3 states, not, or at least 2 states, not to report by December 19th, which would take those electoral votes away from Trump, meaning that it would take him, well, if all 3, it could take him down like 265, 266. If they were all delayed. But now I'm told that if Wisconsin or any other state or a combination of states do not, if their electors don't vote on December 19th, then the total electoral vote is reduced by that number of electoral votes, and the 270 threshold reduces proportionately. So I need to check into that, because one of the theories out there on this recount is that they're simply trying to delay enough states, these 3, from reporting by December 19th, which means those electors could not vote, which means Trump would be denied those votes, which would reduce his majority over 270. No, no, even when you beat them, they never. The reason I'm thinking there might be something to this is because I'm remembering in the Florida recount, it's vague, and I'm going to have to really, really search the deep, dark crevices of my fertile mind. But I think at one stage the Democrats suggested just throwing Florida out. It was. Just throw it out. That would have given Gore the presidency. That would have given Gore a majority of the electoral votes. It would not have been 270 if you threw out Florida's 15. He wouldn't have needed 270. So that's why I'm thinking there might be something to this, that it doesn't matter if these states don't report. It just reduces the 270 proportionally to a lesser number that Trump would need and still have it. I just got an email. I'm on a secret email list. I get Democrat Party fundraising emails, and they sure as hell are raising money off this now. It's not just Jill Stein. They're asking for minimum $3 donations for a little sticker that says, "I proudly voted for Hillary," to put on your car or wherever. And it's all based, the fundraising appeals, all based on how Trump did not win the election, that Hillary got 2 million plus additional votes than Trump, more than Trump did, and that the election was not legit, and Democrats need to show that they understand there's some such thing. But they're fundraising off of it. But do not, regardless of the intricate details here, the real objective of this is to delegitimize Donald Trump, period. His election, victory, and his upcoming presidency. That's the objective of all of this. Now to the Fidel Castro stack. This, folks, is mind-boggling. When you stop and consider who Fidel Castro was. Fidel Castro imprisoned, tortured, killed, executed his own people for the crime of pursuing life, liberty, and happiness. He conducted a 50-year war against human nature. The left, which includes Barack Obama, has romanticized what should be itemized, condemned, and defeated. It's been a tough few weeks for the left, and the death of Fidel Castro was apparently a tipping point for them to drive them even further insane. A man by the name of Carlos Ari is a professor of history and religious studies at Yale. He wrote in the Washington Post 13 facts about Fidel Castro. He turned Cuba into a colony of the Soviet Union and nearly caused a nuclear holocaust, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted the missiles. He wanted Khrushchev to launch nuclear strikes against America. He sponsored terrorism wherever he could and allied himself with many of the worst dictators on earth. Castro was not a dictator. He was a tyrant. He was a murderous thug tyrant. He was responsible for so many thousands of executions and disappearances in Cuba that a precise number is hard to reckon. He tolerated no dissent. He built concentration camps and prisons at an unprecedented rate. He filled them to capacity. He incarcerated a higher percentage of his own people than most other modern dictators, including Stalin. And when his jails became filled to the brim, he simply released them and put them on boats and sent them out into the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. He condoned and encouraged torture. And you know how the left in this country reacted to what they thought was torture at Guantanamo Bay against... Oh, that reminds me. Just learned, my friends, that the perpetrator at The Ohio State University ran people down with a car and stabbed them and nicked them with a butcher knife. Isn't that an ISIS technique? Isn't that, in fact, how ISIS advises young recruits? Because there's so many people on the lookout for bombs and guns now that the best way to do it is just grab a car and start mowing people down and have a knife with you and just start randomly stabbing people. I think that's an ISIS directive. And supposedly the perp here at The Ohio State University is a Somali refugee. A Somali refugee could easily be militant Islamic. Wouldn't take much there. We'll have to wait and find out. Fidel Castro forced nearly 20% of his people into exile. He prompted thousands to meet their deaths at sea, unseen and uncounted, while fleeing from him on rafts and other crewed vessels. He claimed all property for himself and his henchmen. He strangled food production and impoverished the vast majority of his people. In 1959, the Castro Revolution literally nationalized everything. They took Castro, and this, the people were surprised. They expected Castro was going to liberate them from tyranny, the tyranny that was Batista. And he did a double whammy. The wealthy, the middle class, he took everything. He took their homes, he took their land. I have friends here in South Florida who lost multi-million-dollar estates, property, and businesses. And they fled here. They've reestablished those businesses in many cases here in the United States. And they live to this day to get their property in Cuba back. And they have lived with that desire since 1959 and 1960. It's one of the things that has fueled them. Fidel Castro outlawed private enterprise and labor unions. He wiped out the middle class. He turned Cubans into slaves of the state, earning about $2 to $3 a day. He persecuted gay people and tried to eradicate religion. This is one of the most amazing things. Cuba wants you to think that it is a gay paradise. And gay Americans, militant gay, the leftist militant gay political operators in this country want you to believe that Cuba was a gay paradise. And it was not. Gay people were persecuted and executed the moment it was discovered they were gay. And Castro outlawed the church. Now, one of the things that communists do, and by the way, I'm going to give you a little preview here. Angelo Codevilla is back. I was reading over the weekend a very, 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 very long essay he wrote for the Claremont Review of Books. It's essentially about political correctness. But in the process of writing about political correctness, he correctly identifies the stratagems and philosophies of communists. One of the things they do, for example, the Soviet Union, China, every strict Castro, They destroy all religion. They outlaw it. They demolish churches, but they always leave a church here or there. They always allow a congregation here or there. And in fact, in some cases, they even have party members acting as dissidents. The purpose of this is so the population can see remnants of what the regime is telling you is vile and filthy, so that there is always work for the revolution to do. If they wiped out every church, then they would have nothing to rail against. So they keep a church or two in Havana open, or maybe Santiago de Cuba. They always leave a vestige. Same thing, they eradicate and execute homosexuals, but they always leave some in prominent positions to show that the regime, in Castro's case, he had a propaganda machine making it look like Cuba was a gay paradise. So he left some gays and put them in prominent, had rainbow flags around. But the vast majority of gay people in Cuba are not alive today. Communism is an evil thing, folks. It is an ugly, evil, vile, inhumane thing. And Castro was one of the world's most dominant communists ever. He censored all means of expression and communication. None of what I have just shared with you is arguable. Every bit of this Castro was, every bit of this Castro did, and more. There was nothing redeemable about Fidel Castro. Castro was the ideal communist. The Soviet Union communism, Fidel Castro's communism, is all predicated on equality and sameness and prosperity run by the state. The only people who benefit are the leaders. They are the only people. The struggle is always presented as ongoing because there are always oppressors. It's like Obama finding phantom opponents everywhere trying to stop him. It's to keep people in line. It's to keep people thinking that there still is that day in the future where the revolution might actually succeed and make them prosperous. In Castro's case, the illusion lasted for 60 years. And it was all an illusion. Cuba was a hellhole. Now, all of this is undeniable, and yet looking at media over the weekend and watching TV and radio, listening to leftists lament and lionize and celebrate this, it was just the most ungodly thing. And I've got an example here from the Washington Post that's just beyond sickening. And I'm going to name the people that wrote it: Dom Phillips and Joshua Partlow. On every stage where a Latin American leader launched into soaring oratory against the imperialists, Fidel Castro was present. In every lonely jungle hideout where guerrillas in olive drab plotted their fight, Castro kept them company. In every country where revolutionaries and communists dreamed of creating a workers' paradise, Castro was a guiding light. No single figure did more to define generations of Latin Americans who sought political upheaval than Castro. Listen to this next, because this is what they loved about him. The American left in this country, the American Democrat Party, Hollywood leftists, these things coming next are what they loved about him. Castro's anti-American rants inspired followers in countries that also saw resources sucked away by local elites in cahoots with the mighty United States. So you see, there was this lone figure in Cuba inspiring other olive-clad, drabbed, military junta-type guys to rise up against the evil Satan that was the United States of America, which was sucking resources away from every Latin American country by the elites. And so Castro stood alone, protecting his people from the United States, which was stealing everything Cuba had. And his people believed it. That's what but it's unconscionable for the Washington Post to write this dribble. In nations with extreme inequality, governments took lessons from Castro's state-run economic model. For modern-day strongmen looking for high-minded justifications to seize control of parliaments, courts, and the media, he was the man. Yeah, in nations with extreme inequality like the United States, not Cuba, no, like the United States, governments took lessons from Castro's state-run economic. There was no economic model. There was no economy. For modern-day strongmen looking for high-minded justifications to, in other words, the existence of the United States justifies Castro seizing control of his island nation and subjugating his people and jailing them and executing them and imprisoning them. The existence of the United States justifies this because we are the real imperial. This is in the Washington Post. These days, many Latin American countries' political and economic ties with Cuba have weakened because of painful recessions and voters' rejection of leftist governments. Leftists in Latin America have little interest in armed revolution anymore, but still Cuba and its influence in the region endures, both because of its advances in education and health care and because of its example of fierce independence. Cuba's influence in the region endures because of its advances. There aren't any advances in education, and there were no advances in health care. And fierce independence? There was no independence, liberty, or freedom of even thought in Cuba. Some, like Castro, transitioned to political leadership and pressed for greater spending on the poor. I mean, this gets sicker and sicker and sicker as it goes. I've got to take a break. You hang in there. Be right back with more in a moment. Okay, listen to this last little reference here from this Washington Post story. And I'm sorry, it might be the New York Times. It could be either one. There's a newfangled reformatter of websites, and it doesn't print everything. Sometimes it doesn't print the byline. Sometimes it doesn't print the website. And I neglected to make a note of it, but it's one of the two. But listen to this. You all know the dire straits Venezuela's in. Venezuela is falling apart. Venezuela's currency is so worthless, you cannot keep a functional amount of it in your wallet. It would take too much. Venezuela has gone the way of every socialist communist regime. It's descended now into utter chaos. Nobody except the leaders has anything. So listen to this. Venezuela modeled itself after Castro's Cuba. The Hugo Chavez government's heavy subsidies for such things as milk and corn flour helped poor Venezuelans in times of high oil revenue, but are difficult to sustain now that petroleum prices have slumped. So the only reason Venezuela's in trouble is because its oil industry is in trouble, and that's because oil prices are down. Venezuela modeled itself after Cuba, modeled itself after Castro, and was such, this Chavez guy was so wonderful. He subsidized milk and corn flour for poor Venezuelans. He had to because nobody could afford anything. There is nothing in Venezuela that's worth recommending to anybody. There's nothing about Cuba other than cigars worth recommending to anybody. And yet the American left is enamored. And the last line of this piece, the Washington Post, while Castro's economic approach has lost popularity, it never was popular. Castro personally is popular. And Snerdley just asked me, why? What is it about Castro that American leftists and worldwide leftists personally loved? And, charisma is a tough thing to explain. Clearly, he had charisma, but I'll tell you what I think it is. I think he hated America. I think they loved him, the way he stood up and pointed fingers at every American president and outlasted them. I think that he garnered all this support via his hatred of this country, which they share. The people we are talking about, it's in this Washington Post story. Every problem Cuba had was the fault of the imperialists in the United States, denying Cuba what poor Fidel was desperately trying to bring, prosperity. I mean, it's the most, it's so intellectually vacant that it defies common sense explanation. It has to be something emotional, the attachment people have to Castro. I mean, the idea that health care in Cuba is better than, and not one of them would ever send a relative, a child, or themselves to Cuba. In fact, when Castro nearly died a number of years ago, you know what it was that killed him? I'll tell you what. He had a colon problem of some kind. I don't know exactly what it was. And the solution to it was a colostomy bag. And he told the doctor, screw that. I'm not wearing a colostomy bag. You stitch up the colon. Well, it didn't work. And the poison in the colon got all through his body, and his body was one giant infection. They had to call in a team of doctors from Spain to save him. Cuban doctors hadn't the slightest idea. Cuban doctors botched the whole thing on his command. But, I mean, we get this romanticized notion that health care in Cuba is better than anywhere in the world and affordable, and it isn't. It's not better, and it isn't affordable. Nothing is affordable. It's so bad in Cuba that Brian Williams told his viewers on MSNBC that Cuban citizens actually prefer being driven around in donkey carts rather than automobiles. Andrea Mitchell practically crying over the death of Fidel Castro. Folks, I'm telling you, the attachment has to be his anti-Americanism. His hatred for America has to be the glue, the link. In addition to whatever other charismatic qualities that Fidel Castro had, they're undeniable. Che Guevara, too. How do you explain Che Guevara? Che Guevara was every bit the murdering terrorist that Castro was. And yet young college women run around wearing Che Guevara T-shirts. Because to them, he was just a hip. He could have been a member of the Stones. Yeah, he looked so cool. He looked hip. He looked like he could have been a rock star. And it defies logical explanation. But this last sentence, while Castro's economic approach has lost popularity, Latin American countries remember him more for his focus on health care, education, and better conditions for the poor. You know, you ask yourself how to deal with this. Better conditions for the poor. Cuba is known by people who know it truly as a gigantic, poverty-stricken island where people earn, essentially, those that have jobs earn no more than $4 a week. There were no better conditions for the poor. In fact, you want to hear some stats very quickly? Let me give you some stats. Study by the State Department's Hugo Lawrence and Kirby Smith. In infant mortality, literacy rates, per capita food consumption, passenger cars per capita, number of telephones, radios and televisions, and many other indicators, Cuba led Latin America when Castro took over on New Year's Eve, 1958. Today, Castro's communism has not just left Cubans economically pauperized, but politically bereft. Some 51,000 Cubans last year entered the United States, and this year's figures will easily surpass that. The numbers of Cuban nationals fleeing Cuba have now quintupled since Obama took office, when it was less than 7,000 annually. In other words, when Castro took over, Cuba was an economic engine. Yeah, the dictator was a thug, Batista, but there was economic prosperity. After 10 short years of Castro, there was no leadership in any category whatsoever, and it was going to continue to get worse for all 60 years of his rule, because he simply took everything for himself and his henchmen. He literally commandeered everything. His was one of the biggest giant scams ever run by a single person on a country. And he could not have gotten away with it were it not with the assistance of other worldwide communists and leftist American sympathizers. It's one of the most stunning things. I mean, this idea that conditions for the poor, better conditions for the poor, is what Castro's known for. It boggles the mind. But that's what liberalism is. That's who they are. Look, it is a great myth that communists, and it's because of the myth that is Marxism, there's a great myth that communism is about upward mobility for the bourgeois, for the middle class, for the proletariat, for the hoi polloi. That's a big myth. That's not communism. Socialism is all a scam designed to keep people impoverished, better to control them. It's designed to enrich the leaders. It's an oppressive, tyrannical form of human arrangement. And the lie is that it is the only way lower middle class people can have upward mobility. It's just absolute BS. All this equality and sameness and equal rights and fairness. You go to any communist country, there's none of that. And there never will be any of that. There's never any of that in liberal societies. There's always anger and misery and unhappiness because it's a false promise that a bunch of dupes end up believing. And it never happens, and they end up, the leftists succeed in blaming capitalists for the failure of Marxism, socialism, communism. It is just despicable. The fact that this way of governance has not been dispatched forever is one of the enduring mysteries to me. And the explanation obviously is psychological. And I intend to discover it. I intend to find out what it is. It's to me, it's unacceptable that people still find anything redeemable in it, even hope, because there's clearly none of that. Here's Ted, Crystal Lake, Illinois. Great to have you, sir. Glad you waited. What's up? What's happening?
Before I ask you my question, I gotta say the scenarios that are come across on the telephone while you're in a commercial, they are fantastic. The writer for those could put a show on the road. They're great. So, but anyway, my question is, in regard to the scenario that Russia interfered with the Clinton election campaign, I don't understand why Russia would not want her as president when the Clinton-Obama strategy essentially is what allowed Russia to move into the Middle East unopposed with what I think of usually as an appeasement strategy. I just don't understand why Russia would not have wanted her as president.
You don't understand why Russia would not have wanted her as president?
Yes.
So you're basically asking, what is all this about the Russians secretly trying to help Trump? Because it seems like in your mind they would want Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, the Obama-Clinton strategy is what allowed them to move into the Middle East unopposed.
Hold on. You're looking at this way too deeply. You're going at this way wrong. This whole Russia affecting the election thing is nothing but a trope. It's nothing but an excuse for the Democrats losing. There's no substance to it whatsoever. The Russians didn't hack the DNC servers. The Russians didn't interfere in the election. And if you get a Democrat in the know to sit down and honestly tell you off the record, they'll admit it. It's just an excuse for why they lost. And it's an attempt to try to disparage and delegitimize Trump by claiming that Trump is chosen by one of our arch-enemies and that Trump is buddy-buddy with one of our arch-enemies, when in fact it's the Democrats who always have been. It's nothing but an excuse that's just made up out of clean air. Somebody created it once the WikiLeaks dump started. There was some leftist speculated that the Russians might be behind it, and that's all it took. They were off and running with it. It doesn't require in-depth analysis. Well, it seems to me that if the Russians were going to interfere, they'd really prefer Hillary. If you want to take it there, that makes perfectly logical sense. Don't misunderstand. I mean, the Hillary would be much easier to roll. I mean, they're kindred spirits. Hillary's proven she can be rolled. She can be Secretary of State. She was rolled by everybody. But the whole thing is nothing more than an excuse, just like the popular vote differential here is nothing more than an excuse to delegitimize Trump's victory, pure and simple. It's all part of a giant strategy that, if successful, ends up as a giant, insurmountable roadblock to Donald Trump. That's what they're trying to assemble here. And the Russians interfered is one little part of it. I wouldn't waste a whole lot of time getting into in-depth analysis of it because there was nothing to it in the first place. Happy to be back at it, folks, but sadly we're out of time. These 3 hours just zipped by, but we're back here tomorrow, revved and ready, with whatever we have to deal with. And nuke, we will do it.